Welcome to Color Country Politics, where we discuss all the important political issues facing Iron County, Utah. Our guests include elected officials and community leaders in or representing Iron County.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Color Country Politics. I am your host, your solo host today. I am without my co-host. So again, all technical things that are weird are solely on me because we're running with a different technological setup today. And I am here with our guinea pig for our new technological setup. I am really excited to introduce you to Dr. Lance Hatch, who is the brand new superintendent at Iron County School District. Welcome and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the welcome and thanks for allowing me to be here.
You bet. So we wanted to have you on because, of course, there's a bond that is going to be on the ballot coming up shortly that our local folks are going to be voting on. So let's kind of jump in and get some great information out there. I know you've been out to as many people as you possibly can get in front of, sort of telling the same information. So let me just kind of have you jump in and talk about, the kind of the information that you've been sharing and a little bit of the history, even though you haven't been here. There is, it's kind of a loaded topic when you talk about the bond in Iron County. So tell us a little bit about what's happening and why we need to have this conversation about a bond.
Yeah, thank you. And I think for me, it starts out with, July 1st, I moved to Cedar City and hadn't been here I lived here 23 years ago. And this place has changed.
Yeah, no, it has. It has definitely changed in the last 23 years.
There's a lot of growth, and it's exciting. I love the growth, and it's fun to see the new construction and people moving in, and that's exciting and fun. There's also some challenges with that. I'm sure there's challenges at the city level, at the county level, but also at the school district level. It starts to put some pressure on our existing facilities. And a bond is really the only way that we have to address major construction needs. So the school board voted over the summer to authorize this $69.5 million bond, and that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
But we have a lot of needs, and so the problems that we're trying to solve are associated with growth, but also with antiquated facilities, inadequate facilities that need to be taken care of.
So take us through that a little bit. I went onto the website and got these slick handouts. And audience, if you want to go to, is it ironschools.org?
Yes.
ironschools.org. They have all of this information there, and it's actually
irondistrict.org.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, irondistrict.org. Irondistrict.org. And you can pick up all of this information as well. So let's start with what is this bond going to pay for? What are the proposed projects? And I want to insert here because I think everybody watching this podcast is aware that several years ago there was another bond that was floated and it did not pass. I think local folks felt like there was just a lot of fluff in it. It was sort of perceived as a slush fund maybe, and it just was not palatable to the majority of the voters. So what is this bond, the $69.5 million, going to be used for?
Yeah, there's 6 projects. And the first 2 that I'll mention are very similar. They're the 2 middle schools. And in those 2 schools, the number of students enrolling is just increasing to a point where we're very limited on what we can do. We have enough students that we could actually add more teachers, reduce class sizes, improve programs. But the facility is just making that to where we can't. Some of the facilities are just inadequate as far as the number of students. For example, in the band and orchestra classes, in both schools, we have over 50% of students are participating in those programs, and that's incredible. It's unheard of across the state. If I were to guess where the rest of the state is, I'd say maybe 10%.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So when you have that many students in those programs, it puts some pressure on those facilities as well.
Do you know, is that historically the same? Have we always had that level of enrollment in the band programs?
For a long time.
Okay.
I don't know what it was like, maybe 20 years ago, but it's been that way for a long time.
Okay.
It really speaks to the teachers that are in those programs,
Yeah.
and you just don't have that many kids participating if it's not a good experience
Sure.
for them.
Okay, so we need to expand the band students.
Well, and we're proposing additions to both schools that would provide for bigger space for those programs, which then opens up classroom space within the school, so then we can add more teachers, more improve those programs. At both schools, we're addressing the science area as well. Right now we have some labs, but teachers, schedule a time to go into the lab. There's not a lab for every teacher. So, the model that most schools are going to now is that you actually have a lab/classroom. Mm-hmm. So by doing that, you don't have to have a standalone classroom lab. You can use that now for another class.
Okay.
And then you have around the outside of the classroom, you have all of the equipment that you need for the labs. So that's what we'd like to do. We're adding, some classrooms there, and then again, by doing that, it frees up the other classrooms within the buildings, and it would really help us with the pressure that we're feeling at those two schools.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. Okay, so Cedar Middle and Canyon View Middle and Cedar Middle School are both having sort of their music program spaces added on, which is going to create some other space. And then the science thing, I think that's important. Music is important, science is important, so that's something that we definitely need to pay attention to. Okay, so we're going to expand at both the middle schools. What else?
Yeah, and then we have at Cedar High School, we have a facility, a section of the school that's dedicated to science. And it's kind of similar in that there's a couple of labs and the teachers sign up for those labs, but these labs are so old. The sinks are like rusted out and all of the cabinets and everything are original. We also have a big space that is storage area. So if we were to take all of that out and start over again, we would have much better classrooms, mm-hmm. much bigger space that we can adequately take the number of students that are enrolling, and follow that same model mm-hmm. of every classroom is a lab mm-hmm. and a classroom mixed together. And so that's the proposal for Cedar High School.
For Cedar High. Okay. That's great. I see here you've got a couple of elementary school projects.
Yeah, the East Elementary is a building that was built in 1950. I tell a lot of people that doesn't by itself mean that it needs to be replaced, but sometimes what happens in these old buildings is that the systems, the guts of the system starts to deteriorate. And I would just give one example of that, and that's the heating system. We use an old, what really amounts to an old diesel boiler, and it boils the water and it sends the steam out through pipes through every wall in the building. Those go to radiators that then radiate the heat. And what happens after so long is that the steam starts to leak.
Sure.
And it doesn't make it to its destination, which puts more pressure on the boiler, which then, it's super old. So we're very concerned about that system. And if we were to go in and replace everything, we'd have to tear out part of the building just to get a new boiler in.
Right.
Then we'd have to go to every wall and pull out pipes to replace that. And then you'd still have a less efficient system.
Right.
And that's not to mention the electrical. In 1950, they didn't think they needed much electricity
Right.
back then, and things are just a lot different now. So anyway, long story short, it's in dramatic need of replacing. So part of this bond, in fact, the lion's share of the bond would go to rebuilding East Elementary. We can do that on site. We have enough property, so that's really nice. The kids can still go to school at the old school, and then when the new one's built, they can just move right over.
So kind of similar to what happened at North Elementary a few years ago. Use the same sort of footprint on the lot, and then build the new school on the opposite side, and then remove the old elementary school when the new one is ready to go.
Exactly. Okay. And we're actually going to be saving some engineering and architectural costs by using the same design as North, with the addition of some additional classrooms to help with our class size, our number of students that are enrolling in elementary as well. Do a few boundary changes, and that will help us out a lot.
Okay. I've heard some concerns from parents that the boundaries are just a little ski-wampus, and I'm sure that that's to kind of balance out where there's enough room to put the students. Okay, so that's good. One of the things that, before we move on to the other couple of specifics in the bond, last time we were talking about the bond, one of the things that was really at the forefront of the conversation was student safety, protecting students in the case of an emergency, in the case of, God forbid, an attack, which has happened, not here, but so as we're talking about, the middle schools, the elementary schools, building a new elementary school, is there anything that is being allocated toward kind of ramping up and hardening, I guess, the schools?
Yes, this bond does not address that.
Okay.
However, that's because the district has made the decision that regardless of whether the public supports this bond or not, those things need to be done. So they've been setting aside money in the regular capital budget that's intended to help with maintenance of the facilities. And plans have been made. Those are starting to go into effect. I think by November, I think we'll have everything figured out, how we're going to do everything, and then they'll start the work. But that's something that we just felt like didn't need to be a part of, whether
this ask.
We might not pass the bond.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether we do or not, these things have to be done.
Okay. So. Okay, that's great information. I'm glad for that because I hadn't heard that in any of the presentations. Okay, let's get to the sort of the last two pieces of the $69.5 million bond proposal. And Parowan is potentially going to get some love.
Yeah.
In this bond.
Yeah, they need it too. Parowan High School is the only high school in the state of Utah that does not have a kitchen or cafeteria. And a lot of people don't realize that, but they walk over to the elementary school to use their cafeteria for lunch. And so now you have, seniors mingling in the same space as younger students, and it's just not ideal. On top of that, they just need a facility for their school. So also, Parowan Elementary School has limited space for PE. The other elementary schools have full-sized, areas, usually a dual purpose of cafeteria and a gym. And Parowan just doesn't have that. So the plan is to address both of those needs at once and construct a facility right in between both schools.
Okay.
And that would be a kitchen and a cafeteria, the old style, the tables go up into the wall.
Okay.
And when the tables are up, it's a full gym that can be used for pickleball, tennis, basketball, volleyball, which is badly needed also because we're approaching the winter sports season where you have cheer, drill, girls basketball, boys basketball, and wrestling. Everybody's vying for gym space, and so for them to have another space would be extremely valuable. So we're excited about that project.
I'll bet there's not a lot of people, at least I was not aware that there wasn't even a cafeteria facility at Parowan High. That kind of blew my mind a little bit when I heard.
It surprises everybody who I tell. It kind of takes them back a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm having flashbacks to elementary school, at good old Woods Cross Elementary, where we had the tables that went up into the wall. I mean, it's proven technology.
Hey, yeah, that's right. Stood the test of time. I've talked to some older people who said, "Hey, that's the way we used to do it too."
That's right. That's
well,
right.
If it works.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the last thing that is on irondistrict.org as far as the projects that are going to be included in this bond if it is passed is transportation. Talk to us a little bit about why that is necessary.
Yeah, and this is the smallest out of all the projects. It's the smallest one. Only 4% of the bond proceeds go to this one, but it's very important. Our new students are not moving next to the buildings, not next to the schools. They're moving in far away from the schools, which means that we are busing a lot more students. So our bus fleet increases. Our space that we have right now is kind of a triangular piece of property, which doesn't really allow for good movement, and it's just not quite big enough. But the district already owns property not very far from where the current facility is. And, the idea is twofold. We need enough space to get all the buses and be able to move them around. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, our mechanics are pretty amazing. They keep our buses running. If the buses aren't running, kids aren't getting to school.
Right.
So we have to have them running. And they do a great job, but they do so right now in some facilities and with some equipment that isn't quite up to par.
Okay.
And so we need them to be very efficient, and if that's what we need, then we need to provide them the equipment and the facility to do that.
Okay. So we've got 2 middle school projects at Cedar Middle and Canyon View Middle, having to do with music and science, which I think is great. Cedar High is going to get a new science wing that's going to free up some additional classroom space. East Elementary we're just starting from the ground up at East Elementary. Parowan is going to get sounds like a much needed lunch area and gym area. And then we'll get some relief over to our transportation people. That's something that I think is easy to kind of overlook. You just assume the buses are going to run on time. So that's great. Okay, so now we kind of know what the goal is for this money. Take us through, how expensive is this going to be? How is this going to impact our local folks here? Who's going to be paying for it? How is it going to be paid for? Just give us kind of the lowdown on all of that.
Yeah, this is why we put it on the ballot, because the taxpayers end up paying for this, the people who own property. And so we figure, the best way to explain it is to use an example. And the state requires that we use somewhat of a median in house value. Mm-hmm. And so that's been set at $300,000. So if a residence, a home, was valued at $300,000 today, the tax burden for that home back in 2015, just for bonds, I'm not talking total property tax, just the part that's associated with school district bonds, was $350 per year. And as we paid off bonds, because we had bonds issued back then in 2015, but as we paid those off, that has gone down. So the cost to the taxpayer has decreased over time, to the point where this year it's decreased all the way down almost to right at about $120. So it's decreased dramatically.
I don't know if you can see that, but if you go on irondistrict.org, this is sort of the graph that will give you a visual on what that looks like. So back in 2015, property owners have been paying on an existing bond.
That's right.
And that started out at about $350,000. per year on an assumed $300,000 home. Right now we're down to, I can see it's about $120 a year. So we've actually picked up a savings as property owners in the last, 6 years, from 2015 to 2021. So so what happens next? So we've paid down that bond. We've picked up, maybe $100 or $230 a year or something like that. So how does that sort of intersect with what the school district is asking for with the $69.5 million?
So the proposed bond would take us up to, just a little over $200 per year. So that is an increase from this year. But if you look at what you were paying in 2020, it's still a $30 decrease from what was being paid in 2020. So what we're trying to help people understand is what you paid last year, even if we pass the bond, you'll still be paying less than you were paying last year. And we are able to address all those needs. So that's an important part of our message, and it's not just a message, it is the full-on intent of the school board to try our best to address our needs without an undue burden on the taxpayer.
Good.
And I think they have done an excellent job in structuring this. You can see in the graph that as the existing bonds expire, then that also takes into effect, how much taxpayers are paying. I do want to point out that we're being very transparent. This bond does not address all of our needs. We're still growing. For example, we are going to need probably another elementary school at some point. And we feel like if we continue to grow like we are, and we may not, but if we do, we're probably looking at a major project again in 2023 coming back to the public. But again, that's structured that way because by doing so, the taxpayer experiences no increase at all. They just continue paying what they've been paying through the rest of that time.
So that was a question I was going to ask so this bond that we're talking about that's going to be on the ballot this year, just coming up in a week or so, $69.5 million, that's really geared toward addressing needs that we have right now. Like looking at this list, this seems like some pretty critical infrastructure that needs to happen with the school district. But what I'm seeing from this information is that that's going to take care of what we need right now, but we are still growing, and we talk about this a lot in all of the different forums that we're in. It's something that everybody is concerned about. Everybody is sort of talking about is the growth. We are projected to double our population in a very few short years. I've heard 20, I've heard 25. But somewhere in there. And the reality of Utah and southern Utah and Cedar City and Iron County is that there's two things that are happening. We've been discovered. People are moving here. We know that. The other thing is our local population is really liking what we've got here. And so we're seeing these two things happen where we're having in-migration from other places. But we're also, compared to, say, even like 2015, is not that long ago, people are choosing to stay here and they're not moving out at the same rate that they were. So those two things combined are creating a situation where we just have to understand that growth is happening. We have to have a plan to deal with growth at the city level, the county level, and the school district. So just briefly, because we want to focus kind of on what's in front of us right now with this bond, but just briefly, what does the growth look like from the school district's point of view?
Well, one number that I can share is the last 10 years. So if we just look at the last 10 years, we have increased enrollment 1,500 students. That's the equivalent of Cedar High School. And so that's a lot to try and absorb without any additional facilities.
Right.
and I think that we've done a really good job of managing that, and that's really why we're coming to the public right now. But that growth is happening in certain areas as well, and so that's one of the concerns that we have. Is you have Iron Springs Elementary and Three Peaks Elementary. These serve our students on the west. That's where all the growth is happening, and they are bursting.
Yeah.
And so we have other schools that aren't, and so we are looking at some boundary changes to alleviate some of that pressure. But in the long term, we're going to need to do something there.
Yeah. Let me kind of bring us back to what's going on right now, because this was sort of prominent on irondistrict.org. We've talked about expanding the science and the music spaces to create space for additional classrooms, which means there's the potential, I would assume, to hire more teachers, get that class size reduced, which we're famous in Utah for having just gigantic class sizes. But one of the things that is very prominent is the bond money will not be used for salaries. So just briefly take us through that. We've talked about what the bond funds will be used for. If we do get the bond passed and all of this comes to fruition, how many teachers are you looking to hire? How is that going to be paid for? What does that look like at the school district level?
Yeah, great question. And again, the bond really it can only be used for facilities. But what happens with growth is that we are funded as a school district based on pupil numbers. So when the state allocates our funds, it is based on how many students you have. So each student, we receive a certain amount. And as we get more students, that's how we hire teachers. That's how we pay their salaries and their benefits. And so the more students we have, so that's what I mean by we have more than enough students. We just don't have a place to put those teachers. So the funding is coming with the students, and that's how that's taken care of.
Okay, fantastic. So it's mostly state funded.
Yes,
then. Okay.
It's all state funded.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple of questions that I have seen pop up in different conversations about this. So I'm an empty nester. My kids are in their 20s. They don't live in the area any longer. Why should I care about a bond like this when I don't have kids in school anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is this community, and this is a community that cares. This is a community who wants to take care of each other. We also know that the last thing we need is an uneducated, underprepared group of youngsters leaving our system. Nobody wants that. I don't think anybody, even if you don't have kids in the system, even if you've never had children, we know what happens to people who are uneducated. They turn to crime. They turn to government support. There's just so many devastating. They turn frankly to alcohol and drugs. We don't need that in our community, and we take care of that through our education system. I mean, not completely, but an educated person has a chance to be productive and help in society, as opposed to the other problems.
Sure. One of the other sort of comments I've seen is the school district has all kinds of problems. Why don't they solve those problems before they come to the taxpayers and ask for more money? How do you respond to that?
Well, some of the problems that they might be referring to have nothing to do with our facilities. Our facilities are a problem that can only be solved through the bond. So, there might be some other problems that people have and that, that they don't like. And quite frankly, in my 3 months here, I've heard about some of those.
I'm sure you have.
And, we're here to work hard. We're here to make sure that we're doing the right things for kids. within the system that we have and the state laws that we have to abide by, and the district policies that we have, and given those restraints, we are dedicated to solve all the problems that we can, and we hope that people will bring those concerns to us and be a partner with us in trying to solve those problems.
That's great. And just anecdotally, I have heard only good things since you have started your tenure at the Iron County School District as the superintendent. I think a lot of folks locally appreciate your willingness to get out and meet people and get involved and really talk about this and provide that level of transparency. I think that's a big deal. So before we close out here, is there anything else that you would like the community to know about the bond, about the projects, about anything else that's happening at the school district?
Oh, not really. I mean, this, again, I guess I'll go back to the board in working through this process. We have wants and we have needs. And what they've done is very carefully taken off everything that's a want, and then they just looked at the needs. And then they took all of the needs that can wait and put them aside and said, really, we have to do these things. These projects were on the previous bond. Right. There were some other stuff too, but these have been waiting, a while to be done. And so, we just, I don't want to tell anybody how to vote, but I hope that when you fill in one of those circles that people understand what we're asking for.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your work in getting out and explaining this and talking to people. And I can tell you that relative to the last time the bond was on the ballot, I'm hearing a lot more solid support out in the community. I think presenting it in this fashion, I think most people can see that these really are critically needed projects for what we have right now. Yeah. So I think that's great. Well, Dr. Lance Hatch, Superintendent of the Iron County School District, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's great to be able to get this information out there. And I am Jenny Hendricks. This has been your latest episode of Color Country Politics. Hopefully my co-host will be back soon and we'll be at it again. So let me know what your thoughts are on this. Give us a comment. Let us know how you think about this proposed bond. We'll see you soon.
You've been listening to Color Country Politics, a production in cooperation with Utah Politico Hub and graciously sponsored by Century 21 Prestige Realty at 121 North Main Street, Cedar City. Special thanks to Amoeba Crew for use of their song Background Indie Rock, licensed under Creative Commons. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Also, check out our YouTube channel where we post video of our interviews. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and our website at www.colorcountrypolitics.com.